I opened my wife's old email account, and found letters she wrote to me many years ago. But we only met 2 years ago. I wasn't snooping. At least, not in the way you think. I was hunting for a tax document. My old Gmail was cluttered with years of junk, so I decided to dig through a long-forgotten account I hadn't touched since my mid-20s. It was one of those addresses you make when you're young and think, darkwarrior_87, sounds cool. I stopped using it more than a decade ago. The login still worked. No two-factor back then, just the same dumb password I'd used for years. The inbox was a time capsule, spam from MySpace, receipts from Amazon for things I don't remember buying, messages from friends I've lost touch with. And then I saw her name. Claire. The first subject line froze me. I miss our trip to Monterey, can't stop thinking about you. The email was dated July 2013, 10 years ago. Claire and I met in 2021. At first, I figured it had to be another Claire. Common name, right? But I clicked it. And there she was. My Claire. Same way she signs her messages now, love you, C. She wrote about a long weekend we'd spent driving the coast, stopping for clam chowder at some little place by the pier, watching sea otters float on their backs. She mentioned a moment, me leaning over the railing, my hand squeezing hers without looking, that she said made her fall in love with me all over again. I read it 3 times. It wasn't just the content, it was the way she knew me. Or the me she thought I was. She used the same nickname she calls me today. She described habits, mannerisms, the way I tap my fingers when I'm thinking, how I laugh under my breath before I answer a serious question. Things she couldn't have possibly known in 2013. Because in 2013, I was living 2 states away. I'd never been to Monterey. And I had never met her. I told myself it was a prank. That's the kind of thing my old friends might have done, find my old login somehow, send fake emails to mess with me. But why would anyone do that for a joke and then never tell me? I scrolled down through the inbox. There were more. 2012, can't sleep without hearing you breathe. 2011, you were so quiet at the wedding reception, are you okay? 2010, I'm counting the days until we see Paris together again. Every one of them was written to me. Using my name. Talking about trips I never took, conversations I never had, moments that didn't happen. I couldn't stop reading. The more I went through them, the more they felt real. There were tiny details, the way my hair curls at the back of my neck when it gets too long, how I stack sugar packets into a little pyramid when I'm bored at a cafe. I do those things now. But back then? Nobody outside my immediate circle would have noticed, and Claire wasn't in my circle. I checked the headers. The emails were real, sent from an old address she still sometimes uses for store coupons. No signs of tampering. And the timestamps matched. It was like someone had taken the last 2 years of our marriage, the intimacy, the private habits, and dropped them into the past. That night, Claire was curled up on the couch watching one of those reality shows she likes. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just asked her, casually, if she'd ever been to Monterey. She laughed and said, of course. Years ago. Before you. Why? I asked who she went with. She frowned, like she was trying to remember. Then she said, oh, just a friend. And something in the way she said, friend, made my skin prickle. I'm not the paranoid type. But when you read words from your wife written a decade before you met, words describing you like she's known you forever, it does something to your brain. I decided to dig deeper. Old social media posts. Travel photos. Mutual friends. Anything that might explain what I'd found. And that's when I noticed something strange. A few older friends of hers, people I'd met briefly at our wedding, had acted oddly the first time we were introduced. A flicker of recognition, like they were seeing a ghost. Back then, I chalked it up to wedding day weirdness. Now I wasn't so sure. Over the next week, I kept reading the old emails in secret. And one detail kept haunting me. In a message from September 2012, she wrote, "Sometimes I think you were made just for me. No one else gets you like I do. Not even your own family." That scared me. Because, even now, Claire says almost those exact words. And I'm starting to wonder if, to her, I'm not me at all. The first thing I did was try to prove the emails wrong. I went full accountant on my own past. Bank statements, rent receipts, work calendars, texts archived on an old phone I had to jumpstart with a hair dryer because the battery had swollen. If Claire said we were in Monterey on July 13, 2013, then I would show I was somewhere else. I was. Sort of. A debit card charge put me at a gas station outside Sacramento that morning. Another charge that night, Thai food, 2 entrees, medium spice, in Davis. I was in California, yeah, but not Monterey. And that made things worse. Because Monterey was, within striking distance. For hours when traffic behaved. The emails made it sound like a spontaneous weekend. I could have gone. I didn't, but I could have. I scrolled the rest: Uber trip to a friend's apartment in the city the next day, text thread about bring beer for the game. None of that put me beyond reasonable doubt. You can split a weekend into 2 lives if you want it badly enough. Up until last week I would have said I never did that. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened Claire's 2013 email again and forced myself to read slower. She mentioned a diner with a neon pelican in the window, the pelican that looks like he's choking. She said we'd ordered 1 slice of lemon meringue pie, because you always say you don't like dessert until it's in front of you. She said I'd taken the foil from a sugar packet and rolled it into a tight little ball that I still might have in my pocket. I do that now. I do it without thinking. I found 3 of those tiny aluminum beads at the bottom of my backpack last month and didn't remember making them. The neon pelican was something to check. If it was real, I could go stand under it and tell myself it didn't mean anything. Google made it easy. There was a diner off Cannery Row with a blue pelican sign. Photos showed the bird's long beak bent at a weird angle like he'd swallowed a flashlight. I stared at the photo too long and felt a pinch behind my eye, like my brain was trying to push something out. I didn't tell Claire where I was going. I told her I had a Saturday errand, hardware store stuff. She kissed me on the cheek without looking up from her laptop and said we were out of those plant food sticks that look like chalk. On the drive I kept thinking, dumbly, that I shouldn't have worn this hoodie. The one with the stitched arrowhead on the chest. I couldn't say why, just a prickly intuition that I shouldn't look like myself. Then I laughed at that, because who else was I going to look like? The diner was still there. Same sign, same white veneer booths, 1 corner TV with the sound off and captions crawling underneath a game show host's frozen grin. On the wall by the counter, a framed, sun-bleached photo of the pelican in better days. I took the stool at the end, the one nearest the register, and watched the man behind the counter pour coffee into a glass pot with the kind of efficiency you only get from doing it 1,000 times. He looked up, nodded once, and then, this is the part that made the hairs on my arms lift, he smiled like we knew each other. Not a friendly, welcome-in smile. Haven't seen you in a while smile. Back again, he said. I swallowed. Maybe. He laughed. You and maybe. Still can't make up your mind about pie. It took me a second to find my voice. Do I come here a lot? Used to, he said, already reaching for a coffee cup like my answer was a foregone conclusion. Couple summers in a row. You and your girl with the red scarf. Claire doesn't wear scarves. Scarves make her itch. She says that like a fact of physics. What's her name? I asked. My hands were flat on the counter. They looked like someone else's hands, the knuckles too white. He shrugged. I never asked. You called her red once and she made a face and said, "Don't you dare start that," and you said, "I won't, Claire," and that was that. Claire, right? My tongue was dry. Right. He set the coffee down. You okay, man? You look like you just saw the pelican eat a kid. I'm fine. I wasn't. What about me? I forced it out lighter, like a joke. Do I look the same? He cocked his head. You shaved. And you, He squinted, trying to place it. Did you break your nose? It's a hair different. Not bad different. Just, something. I touched my nose without meaning to. It's never been broken, not that I remember. Pie, he said. I don't, the right answer wasn't coming. I heard myself say, lemon meringue. 1 slice. 2 forks. He grinned. There you go. When he slid the plate in front of me, I just stared at it. The lemon smelled like citrus cleaner. The meringue had toasted tips like little mountains. I didn't pick up the fork. I picked up a sugar packet. Tore the corner. Poured the grains into my coffee. And then, like a puppet on a string, I rolled the foil between my fingers until it made a perfect little ball. I left the pie untouched and walked outside. The sky was a glaring, indifferent blue. The tourists were tourists. The whole street felt like a stage that had seen 1,000 shows and would see 1,000 more. I leaned against the brick and counted my breaths until my heart came back to me. On the drive home, I called an old coworker from my California days and asked a simple question: did you ever see me down in Monterey around 2013? He said yeah, once, with that girl from the Bay who always wore boots with a dress. He couldn't remember her name. He remembered me being quiet that day, quieter than usual. You were different with her, he said. Like you were trying not to step on something fragile. When I got home, Claire was in the kitchen making tea. She looked at my face and asked if I'd seen a ghost. I said I'd seen a pelican. She laughed and tossed a tea bag at me. Her hair was pulled up, a few pieces had fallen out and framed her face. She looked like herself, pretty, real, the safest place in the room, and I hated every part of what I had to do next. Hey, I said. Where's your old laptop? She blinked. Why? I thought I'd back up your photos. I was thinking about doing a combined album. For the wedding. So we can show both sides. She smiled at that, softening. Memories are her currency. It's in the office. Then she narrowed her eyes. Careful, it's moody. It overheats if you look at it wrong. I told her I'd risk it. Her old MacBook sounded like a hair dryer from the minute it woke up. I logged in with the password I knew, the one based on a dog she had growing up, and clicked through photos. The thumbnails took forever to populate. Years bloomed across the screen: 2010, 2011, 2012. I tried not to think about what it meant that I was digging in her past without permission. I told myself I was protecting us from a glitch in the universe. I searched Monterey. The album app found nothing. I searched Cannery Row. Nothing. Pelican. Nothing. So I stopped searching for a place and searched for a person. I typed my own name. A handful of pictures came up from the last 2 years. The tagged faces feature put the little white square around me like a headshot. I clicked Show All. The computer spun, then filled the page with grids of my face. Me at our engagement dinner. Me holding the rings in my palm like I was presenting them to a judge. Me on the couch asleep, mouth open, one hand on my chest like a casualty. And then, halfway down, 2 photos with dates from 2013. The same white square around a face that looked like mine. I felt the floor tilt. They were grainy and too dark, obviously zoomed in from a distance. In both, the man was turning away, half profile only, but the square had chosen him with confidence. Photo recognition isn't psychic, it looks at geometry. Eyes, nose, mouth, the spacing between. Whatever math the algorithm used, it thought that half-profile was me. I clicked one open. A bar interior, string lights above a dartboard, a chalkboard that said, Trivia Night Thursday. The man was lifting a bottle, smiling at someone out of frame. He had my cheekbones. He had my laugh lines. He had the same cowlick, pushed back by a hand that wasn't in the frame. His nose, yes. A little different. Straighter at the bridge. There it was. The thing the diner guy had seen. I sat there until the screen dimmed itself, reminding me I hadn't moved. The other photo was outside a coffee shop with tables on the sidewalk. The same man stood with his back to the window, head bent close to a woman with a red scarf. She was mid-laugh, eyes squeezed shut. Her profile was unmistakable. Claire. I scrolled for the file info. Date, September 12, 2013. Location, San Francisco. Camera, iPhone 5. She'd named the album Autumn. I closed the laptop when I heard her come down the hall. I felt suddenly, childishly, like I'd be caught with a hand in a jar. She leaned against the doorway with that mock-stern look she does when she thinks I'm slacking. Are you creating masterpieces in there or just watching videos of dogs falling off couches? Both, I said, and she laughed and came to kiss my forehead. That night I couldn't sleep. I got up twice and stood over the laundry basket like I'd find answers under a pile of sweaters. At 3 a.m. I gave up and went back to the office, opened her laptop again, and dragged the two photos onto a USB stick so fast my fingers shook. I know. I know. I hate how that sounds. But I needed to hold them, separate from her cloud, separate from any story she might put around them. Sunday, I drove to the bar from the photo. It was in Potrero Hill, the kind of place that tried to pretend it hadn't noticed the neighborhood had changed. The chalkboard still announced trivia on Thursdays. The string lights were the same. The bartender was older, gray in his beard. He looked at me and then looked hard at me, like the second glance was a compulsion. You look familiar, he said. I get that, I said. Was there a guy who used to come in here, 10 years ago, looked like me? He smirked. Yeah. There was. You his brother? I hesitated the wrong amount of time. Something like that. He nodded like he'd seen it all. We called him the professor. Not because he was smart, though maybe he was. Because he dressed like he might stand up and lecture any second. Same coat all the time. Tweed or corduroy, couldn't tell. He'd take it off and fold it so carefully, like it was made of glass. I'd never owned a tweed anything. He come in with a woman? I asked. Red scarf? The bartender blew air out of his nose. Yeah. The scarf. She tipped in coins sometimes and it made me insane. But she had a smile that made the room 10 degrees warmer, so I forgave it. You looking for her? Just asking. He leaned closer. He got in a fight once, your guy. Not like fists. Words. With a big dude in a suit who knew his name. They kept it quiet, but you could feel it up and down the bar. The girl, she was outside when it happened. Came in after and put her hands on his face like he was a vase with a crack. They left early. What was his name? I asked. My voice sounded like I'd borrowed it. Mark, he said, too confidently. Then he frowned, correcting himself. No. Matt. No. He shook his head. It started with M. I remember that because I thought, of course it does, that's a good name for the professor. I showed him the photo. He didn't hesitate. That's him. That's the coat. My stomach turned. The coat was brown. There was a patch on the elbow where the fabric had thinned. I don't know why that detail hurt, but it did. I left him a big tip I couldn't afford and walked back to my car. On the sidewalk, a woman with a stroller did the double take I was starting to recognize. The look says, I know you. The second look says, but you're not him. Back home, I stared at the photos until the edges went soft. I told myself a reasonable story. My wife had a boyfriend a decade ago who looked like me, strikingly, uncomfortably like me, and for reasons I didn't fully understand, she'd written emails to my old address as if I were him. Maybe she thought it was cute. Maybe she didn't realize the account still existed. Maybe she'd intended to send them and never did, and they bounced around the internet and landed in the weirdest mailbox possible. Okay. Fine. But then there was the diner guy, and the bartender, and my coworker, and all of them thinking they'd seen me before. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a catfish. This was a cut that had been made long ago and sewn up, and now the seam was splitting under my fingers. Monday night, I finally asked Claire a question I should have asked on day one. Did you ever date anyone who looked like me? She was making pasta, standing in the kitchen with a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. The steam fogged her cheeks. She looked at me as if I'd asked if she'd ever owned shoes. What? Anyone, I said. Back then. Long time ago. She laughed. You mean like your doppelganger? No. That would be creepy. Would it? I said. Or would it mean something else? She tilted her head. What are we talking about? I almost told her everything. I almost pulled the USB from my pocket and clicked the photos open and watched her face. But something inside me put a hand on my chest and said, not yet. Don't do it in a kitchen with a wooden spoon between you like a sword. Don't do it half prepared. You cannot ask a question like that and then drive to Home Depot for plant sticks. Never mind, I said. Weird thought. Forget it. She stirred the sauce and sang a small nonsense song under her breath, the way she always does when she's trying to lighten a moment. I loved her so much then that my teeth hurt. Loving someone doesn't make you safe. It makes you flammable. The next day, I took the photos to a friend who's a software engineer with a shelf full of cameras and a personality made of patience. We'll call him Neil. I told him I'd found some old pics and I was curious whether the facial recognition was reliable. He set me in his office with a glass of water that tasted exactly like water and ran a program that mapped points, angles of jaw, distance between pupils, ear shape, 90-odd data points that can tell you more than your mother. He didn't look up for a while. When he did, he said, "This is close." How close? Creepily close. But not the same. He tapped a line of code, zoomed on the eyes. Yours tilt a hair more. His brow ridge is less pronounced. If I saw him across a room I'd say he was you. If I saw him brushing his teeth I'd say he was your cousin. You see it? I saw it so clearly that I wanted to crack the monitor and pull him out by the collar. What do you think it means? He shrugged. It means there's someone who looks like you. That happens. Does it? I asked. Happen like this? He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. If you're asking me if this is some glitch in the simulation, I can't help you. If you're asking if you're being messed with, I can look at metadata, make sure the dates are real, that sort of thing. He glanced at me. Who's the woman? My wife, I said. The word felt heavier than usual. He didn't say anything to that. He put his glasses back on and went back to the code. When he finished, he spun his chair and said quietly, "The dates are real. The GPS data's consistent. These are not fakes." On the way out, he put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I don't know, I said. On the drive home, I took a detour past a cafe Claire likes. It's small, plants hanging in the front window, the kind of place where they write your name on the cup and pretend to be surprised when you use a reusable. The barista looked up and lit like a flare. Hey! You're back. I smiled to buy time. Yeah. Almond croissant, right? You and Claire always split one. She taught me to warm it up. I didn't know you were supposed to do that. I'm not dramatic. I don't say, the world went soft around the edges, unless it did, but it did. My mouth made a shape but not a word. When was that? Couple months ago, she said, then made a face. Wait, no, I mean, God, time is weird. More like years. Before I moved. She had the red scarf. You said it made her look like a French spy. There it was again. The scarf. The croissant. The version of me who exists where I didn't go. Do I look different? I asked. She tilted her head like the bartender, like the diner guy, like everyone who was now a mirror I didn't want. A little, she said. You shaved. That night, I sat across from Claire at our small table and watched her eat. She asked me about my day, and I lied in little ways that made me feel filthy. I asked about hers, and she told me about a deadline and a coworker who microwaves fish. At one point she smiled and got butter on her lip and I reached to wipe it and she caught my hand and kissed my wrist. That's the kind of small, ordinary moment I used to think was everything. After dinner, she went to take a bath. I pulled the USB again and opened the bar photo, the coat, the laugh lines, the ghost of my face. I stared until the image broke into pixels, until the pixels broke into color, until the color meant nothing. And then I did something I'd been avoiding since the first email. I typed the name of one of her old friends, the one who cried big, happy tears at our wedding and whispered, "I'm so glad you found your way back to each other." Tessa. We'd only seen her twice since. She lived across the bridge, busy life, flexible job that somehow ate all her time. I texted, "Hey Tessa. Random question. Did I ever meet you before Claire and I officially met?" The typing bubble showed up so fast it was like she'd been waiting. Tessa, oh boy. Are we doing this? Me, doing what? Tessa, I always wondered when this shoe would drop. I stared at that until it felt like the screen was pulling me forward. Me, what shoe? Tessa, I don't want to get in the middle. It's Claire's story. But, look. You look like someone we used to know. A lot. Like, spooky a lot. Me, his name? There was a long pause, dots that appeared and vanished and came back like a heartbeat under a shirt. Tessa, I'm sorry. I can't be the one. Ask her. You should ask her. Me, I am. Soon. Tessa, he was nice. He was good to her. Mostly. He had a way of making a room fall quiet when he wanted it to. People listened. You do that too, but softer. That's a compliment. Anyway. I'm sorry. This is messy. I'm sorry. Me, did he look exactly like me? Tessa, close enough that sometimes when I see you across a room I can't breathe for a second. Me, why did nobody say anything? Tessa, because it felt cruel. Because grief makes fools of us. Because it seemed like the kindest lie. Me, grief? The dots came back. Then disappeared. Then nothing. I sat there a long time with the word open in my lap. The house was quiet. Claire hummed 2 rooms away, water moving in the tub like wind behind a door. When she came out in her robe, she leaned against the frame and asked if I wanted to watch something dumb. I said sure. She said, the trashiest thing, and we ended up watching 20 minutes of people buying houses that looked like airport terminals while she made commentary that had me laughing despite the knot in my chest. At bedtime, she put her leg over mine the way she does when she wants to make sure I stay, as if I'm a balloon on a string. She fell asleep fast. I didn't sleep at all. In the dark, I whispered, not to her, not really, but to the ceiling, to the pelican, to the ghost in the brown coat, who are you? Somewhere between 3 and 4, an answer formed that I didn't want, I'm the second draft. Morning came like it always does, indifferent to how you spent the night. Claire left early for a meeting. I watched her put on lipstick in the hall mirror and saw a flicker, a flash of the woman in the red scarf with her head thrown back at the coffee shop, laughing like someone had just said something so perfect it hurt. When the door shut, I stood in the quiet and finally typed what I should have typed a week ago. I searched public records with the fragment Tessa had given me: grief, obituary databases, social media memorials. 10 minutes in, I found a name repeated under photos of a man in dim bars and sunny beaches. Not my name. Not exactly. But close enough to make my throat click when I swallowed. M. Every comment felt like a hand pressing a bruise. Gone too soon. Still can't believe it. Miss you every day, brother. No details. No dates right at the top. I had to keep clicking, digging under old grief like someone excavating a house that had burned down. There was a photo, a group at a picnic table. Claire in the corner, hair shorter, a sunburn on her nose. The man with his chin on her shoulder. In the comments, someone had written, "You two were always the same person in two bodies." Claire had responded with a heart. I scrolled down, past years of normal posts, birthdays and dogs and "look at this sandwich," until the tone shifted. Condolences. Prayers. If anyone has information, that part froze me. If anyone has information. I clicked. The post opened. No details, just a vague plea and a phone number that went nowhere now. No cause listed. No closure you could put your weight on. I stared at the date. I did the math. He was alive when those emails were sent. He was alive when the bartender misremembered his name. He was alive in the red scarf photos. And then, in a season that slightly overlaps with my own memories of that time, he wasn't. I printed the picnic photo without thinking and hid it under a stack of printer paper on my desk. The act felt guilty in a way I can't justify. It also felt necessary. At lunch, I met Tessa at a park halfway between us. She brought her dog as a shield. I brought nothing but my empty hands. She hugged me like we were old friends, then held me at arm's length and shook her head. "You're going to break something, doing this," she said. "Maybe yourself." "I just want the truth." She glanced around, then said it anyway. His name was Mason. The word landed in my chest like a stone dropped in a well. I thought of the bartender stumbling over names like he was shuffling an old deck. I thought of the coat. I thought of the emails addressed to me years before I existed in her life. Mason what? She hesitated. "You have to ask Claire." Tessa. Her dog yanked the leash. She let him, used the motion to turn away. "I shouldn't have said even that," she said. "I love her. I love you, in the way you love someone because your friend loves them. But this," she looked back at me, eyes bright. She was happy again, you know. We thought that was impossible. She swallowed. "Don't punish her for surviving." "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I said. "I'm trying to figure out if I'm me." She smiled sadly. "You're you. You're just, also an echo. That happens. It's not your fault." Echo. Second draft. Ghost with a pulse. Pick your poison. When I got home, Claire was on the couch, laptop open, a look on her face like she'd been mean to someone on email and was trying to craft the apology. She closed it when I walked in and patted the cushion beside her. "Come tell me you forgive me for not buying groceries," she said. "I made a list but it's mostly chocolate and batteries." I sat. I kissed her forehead. And then, because I couldn't pretend anymore that the world hadn't shifted under us, I said, "Who is Mason?" Her face didn't change at first. Then I watched it change in layers, like looking at a shoreline as the tide goes out. Her eyes stayed on mine longer than usual, as if she was flipping through files behind them and choosing which story to pull. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and very calm. "Where did you hear that name?" I told the truth in the smallest possible way. "Someone mentioned it." "Who?" It doesn't matter. It matters to me. We stared at each other across an inch that felt like a canyon. Water heater humming. A car door outside. A neighbor's dog announcing his opinion of the mail. In the middle of the ordinary noise, a different sound, the precise, brittle click of something important beginning to crack. She set the laptop aside and folded her hands in her lap like she was in church. When she looked up, her eyes were full of something I hadn't seen there before, not guilt exactly, and not fear. Grief, sharpened and polished and stored on a shelf within reach. I didn't tell you about him, she said, because telling makes it too real. And because I didn't want you to think you were a replacement. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. You're not, she said quickly. You're not. But sometimes the universe puts the shape of a person back in front of you, and you count your blessings and you don't ask why. I waited. The room felt like a held breath. Mason, she said softly. His name was Mason. She ran a thumb along the edge of her wedding band, the way she does when she's thinking of something that hurts. And he's gone. How gone? I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Very. I almost asked the question then, the one that sat like hot metal in my throat, how? But something in her face warned me off, like putting a hand near a flame and feeling the heat before you touch it. Instead, I asked the smaller question that might get us there without burning the house down. Why are there emails from you to me from 10 years ago? She blinked. The thumb stopped on the ring. Because, she said, and her mouth trembled just once, you weren't you yet. She swallowed. And I was practicing. The word hung between us, absurd and devastating. Practicing. I thought of the sugar foil ball in my pocket. I thought of the pelican. I thought of the man in the tweed coat folding his sleeves like they were brittle. Outside, the neighbor's dog stopped barking. The house held still, listening to what we would say next. Tell me everything, I said. She drew in a breath. Okay, she said. And then she started.